to Hardtalk India. 3 weeks after the Helka revelations first became public, we ask how much damage have they done to the Bharatiya Janata Party and to the Indian government. With me to answer those questions is the Home Minister of India, a former president of the BJP, and a man many regard as the architect of its electoral success, Lal Krishna Advani. Mr. Advani, let's first start with your party, the BJP. How much damage has been done to its image by the fact that a former party president was filmed receiving money from people who introduced themselves as arms dealers in return for his help?
Let me begin with an admission. I admit that damage has been done. After all, the BJP's growth and ascendancy in Indian politics is different from the manner in which other parties have come up. In case of most other parties, it's their success in manipulating various kinds of vote banks. In the case of the BJP, its ascendancy in the last 1 decade or so has been mainly because of the image it built up among the masses in general, that here is a party with a difference. I recall that when in 1989, the Lok Sabha elections, the BJP, which in the preceding elections had sunk to its all-time low of having 2 seats in the Lok Sabha, it rose from 2 to 86. I remember the New Statesman of London describing the BJP as the real winner and saying in its caption, the winner stands second. And in this article, the New Statesman wrote that while others may attribute it to its stress on Hindutva, I believe that the people, the common voter, which has been very angry with the Congress party's corruption and its decadence and its loss of values, sees in this party a party which is committed to values and which is free from corruption, which is of a different kind.
Very right, Mr. Advani. As you said, you are a party with a difference. Today people turn around and say, oh yes, the BJP is definitely a party with a difference. The difference is one suspects other parties of taking money. We have proof of the BJP president taking money. The difference has become a difference against you, not in your favor.
If someone feels that way, I would not blame him, because it was, even though the money taken by my former party president was for the party, it has been deposited with the party.
You've checked that out?
That's right. I've checked it out.
The full
I've asked
1
the
lakh?
treasurer, the full 1 lakh. But if the same thing had appeared in print that so-and-so party president received 1 lakh for his party, it may not have meant anything. But the kind of picture that appears on the television sets, it certainly hurts. And I felt bad about it, very bad.
Do you accept that this image of Mr. Lakshman taking the money in his hands and putting it in a drawer is going to be played at every election? And that what you're going to have to battle against is the fact that he's become an icon of corruption?
What happened subsequently is even more important. And the manner in which the party has responded, the government has responded, I'm sure that over a period of time, we would be able to counter that image, though our adversaries would certainly like to use it.
But you accept that you have to counter the image?
Yes.
There's hard work ahead of you.
Hard work ahead of
A
me.
lot of hard work.
And therefore it is that my party president only yesterday spoke about the necessity of a code of ethics for all MPs, for all MLAs,
Except
for
that
all
people
ministers.
smiled on the wrong side of their face now when they hear the BJP president talk about ethics. And your own embarrassment suggests you understand why.
It will depend very much on what we actually do, how we conduct ourselves. But I said at the very beginning, while other parties may have grown because of other factors, and in which these things don't matter. In our case, it does matter.
Let's talk about things that you can do later. Let me briefly mention one thing that many people believe you can't do anymore. You used to point the finger of corruption at Congress, and many of your supporters said rightly so. particularly after Bofors, particularly after the HDW submarine scandal. Now that finger is also pointing at the BJP. Doesn't that sadden you?
It does sadden me, though I also point out that when the HDW scandal or the Bofors scandal surfaced, or even before that, the Nagarwala scandal surfaced, right from the days of Nagarwala to the days of Bofors, look at the manner in which the government responded. What did it do? There's Mrs. Gandhi's time, the answer used to be, it's a global phenomenon. It's not happening only in India. It's happening the world over.
Your first response is this is a conspiracy in our case. It's been done to defame us. Wasn't that your first response?
In case of Bofors, I would recall that the entire opposition had to resign from the Lok Sabha in order to make the government move even an inch towards setting up a committee.
You're saying that your response has been better than Congress?
That's crucial. How did the BJP government respond?
Many would disagree that your response has been better with Congress, but the problem really is not the problem of response. The problem for you is the problem of what actually happened. It's never happened to any other party. No other party president in the history of India has been filmed receiving money. That's the problem.
Filmed. People may have received crores, and not for the party,
but it's a question of
but
proof.
For themselves.
In Mr. Lakshman's case, the proof was there.
I have already admitted on that score that it's embarrassing for me, and it's certainly a bad image that we have received because of this issue. But the fact is that in the past there have been people who have been making money left and right.
But they weren't caught.
That's right. You have put your finger on the right issue. In this case, he was filmed.
In this case, he was caught red-handed.
Red-handed, accepting money for the party, not for himself.
Except that accepting money from arms dealers in a country where arms dealers are considered less than savory after the Bofors scandal happened, and we're all aware that the one person you don't accept money from is an arms dealer.
In this case, there were no arms dealers.
Alleged arms dealers.
Yes, they were a fictitious arms dealer.
Even worse, he transgressed an ethic and he was gullible as well. He's caught on both counts.
Therefore, it is that the Prime Minister, in his address to the nation, he said, there have been no deals struck. There have been no ministers involved in it. But even then, I would not like to dismiss this issue as meaningless. I would regard this as a wake-up call for all of us, for my government.
A wake-up call is such mild language. It's such a euphemism. Let me put it to you like this. Looking at everything that Mr. Lakshman did, both what we saw him do as well as what we've heard him commit himself to, as well as the fact that he committed himself to taking money in dollars in the future, would you say that his behavior was indefensible?
It's indefensible indiscretion. That's how I would put it. It was indiscreet. I do not see any corruption in it as yet.
Was he
unless
a fool?
The Commission of Inquiry
was he a fool?
Establishes anything. Indiscretion is a word that indicates that the kind of wisdom that ought to be there is not there. That's obvious. But I would not say that on the basis of what I have seen, it's corruption of any kind.
But
if the Commission of Inquiry says something else, the government has already promised the country that whosoever is found guilty, howsoever high he be, howsoever important he be, action will be taken.
Whosoever, howsoever high.
That's right.
Those are very carefully chosen words. They could point all the way to the top.
They can point to me, they can point to anyone.
Let's briefly come back to something else. In 1996, when the Hawala allegations first surfaced against you, you immediately resigned as MP and you announced that you would not contest elections until your name was cleared. Yet those were merely allegations. In Mr. Lakshman's case, we've all seen him take the money. You've said you were embarrassed, and yet he continues as an MP. Why?
Because the most important thing is that he is president of the party, and as such he resigned. As MP, he need not resign. If he decides to resign, perhaps people will not stop him. In fact, even at that time, I remember telling everyone else that what I am doing in 1996 in the case of the Hawala allegations is something that I feel strongly about. It should not be a standard approach for every political leader who can be accused of all things.
You said a moment ago, if he decides to resign, people will not stop him. Would you advise him to resign?
I don't think so. It's necessary.
But you'd leave it to him?
I'll leave it to him.
And you would hope that he would have the good sense to understand what you're doing?
I would say nothing more than I say that I would not advise him. It's for him to decide.
Let me put this to you. If it wasn't seemly, if it wasn't fitting for him to continue as president of the Bharatiya Janata Party, why is it seemly and fitting for him to continue as a representative of the people?
There is a world of difference between the two. In case of party president, he has a very onerous responsibility. In case of he is an ordinary MP, and there are
You came to power promising to restore probity to institutions. That was your promise. You promised good governance. How can it then not matter that a man who is guilty of this huge, indefensible indiscretion, your words, continues in Parliament? What happens to the institution? What happens to the probity?
Once again, let us not confuse indiscretion with corruption. If it had been a case of corruption, I would have certainly asked him to resign. But when I call it an indiscretion,
it's unsavory.
I call it an indiscretion. I do not think a person who commits an indiscretion should be made to resign his seat in Parliament.
All right, you'd rather he did it on his own.
That is, of course, his own lookout.
Let's come to the damage that has been inflicted by the Tehelka to the image of the government. Are you still committed to probity in high places? Are you still committed to good, clean government?
I think that's our strongest point. In fact,
Is
this is
or was?
Still is. And therefore it is that I drew a distinction between how earlier governments had been responding to such revelations and how this government has done so. There's a world of difference between them.
This government was forced to do so because the allegations spread their tentacles from the PMO at the highest end through to the army serving officers in the middle, through to junior functionaries, your party president, presidents of your associated parties like the Samta. No other government has been faced with such a barrage, such a depth, such a spread. Of course you were forced to respond the way you did. You had no choice.
Not at all. In fact, there is no scandal, no deal done.
Money changed hands.
Money
changed hands.
1 lakh being given to a party.
Is the amount important?
Political party. No. Given to a political party. After all, in this country, people have been receiving money for the party left and right. It is only in my party that we have tried to establish certain norms.
Mr. Advani, 1 lakh received by the party president in his office in return for undertaking to speak to the defense secretary, in return for offering to speak to other people to facilitate arms dealers selling equipment to India.
I do not agree with that.
It's all on tape.
These allegations are still to be probed.
But they're on tape.
Insofar as this amount of 1 lakh is concerned, it is purely for the party, and he has handed it over to the party.
It may be purely for the party, but it's definitely in return for help in facilitating introductions to the defense secretary, to other unnamed people who could be of help.
I do not agree. You are preempting a probe.
I'm not preempting a probe. I'm simply quoting to you what Mr. Lakshman has been heard by the world saying on tape. What I'm saying to you is that the image of good governance, the image of probity in high places is damaged. In fact, it's destroyed, it's shattered.
Well, it's for you to think so, but so far as I'm concerned, I would agree that the image is impaired. But I can also affirm...
Only impaired?
Only impaired. And I can affirm that this government and this party is determined to re-establish that image by our conduct, by our response, our action against all those who have erred.
I want very much to talk about how you're going to re-establish that image, but just for a moment think of this. Never before in the history of India have we had proof of so many people at so many levels, in so many different institutions, taking money. It doesn't matter that no real deal was signed. That only proves that in addition to taking money, they were gullible and foolish. So many people under your government have been caught red-handed. Where then is the claim to good, clean governance?
some army officials have been there, and without any lapse of
pointing
time.
to the Lieutenant General
Yes,
rank.
yes, I entirely agree with that, and let us not forget that it is in this country where we have had Bofors and HDW scandals which have really changed governments. And therefore, when we came to office, our primary concern was that even in defense deals, the whole performance should be of a nature that doesn't leave scope for this.
And in fact, the one thing where you stumbled was on defense deals. You mentioned the background of Bofors and HDW. Today, the country says, in office, the BJP, the NDA, they are no better, they are no different. Congress and them are the same. They all make money. This lot got caught. That's the difference.
So even though there was an illusion of the kind that you have mentioned, my defense minister resigned. But all credit to the defense minister who immediately after coming to office, whatever allegations...
Did he have a choice? In his home, his party president accepting money, maybe not herself in person, but directing it to another person from arms dealers. The indiscretion of that act is so monumental. In the home of the defense minister, knowing that her own party leader is the defense minister, from arms dealers, in return for ensuring no negligence is done. Horrible indiscretion. Embarrassing.
May I tell you that immediately after assuming office, the defense minister went through all the allegations in respect of defense deals throughout his tenure. And some time back, I do not know when exactly, sent them all to the Chief Vigilance Commissioner, asked him to examine them thoroughly.
Absolutely, only to find that his own party president, sitting in his drawing room unknown to him, was going to foot-fault him and trip him up. That's the indiscretion.
What is more important is that when I was coming for your interview here, at that time, the defense minister, the present defense minister, Jaswant Singh, phones me that he has received a full report from the Chief Vigilance Commissioner in respect of all the allegations that have been made during the tenure of George Fernandez.
And what is the outcome?
I would leave it to the defense minister to make his announcement whenever he wants, whether he wants to make it in parliament or so. I can only say that I feel that this government's credibility would be strengthened by those reports.
Except for the fact that even if your credibility is strengthened, you've just proven to me that you have two party presidents, both of whom are so indiscreet, so foolish, forgive me using that strong word, that they've ended up embarrassing you and making you look corrupt.
All those epithets are not amount to corruption. And I'm concerned more with corruption. I'm certainly concerned with being wisdom and prudent also.
The verdict is we protest. We're a clean government. We have to admit that we're a pretty foolish government.
It can slip sometimes, and therefore those who have slipped have paid the price for it.
You smile as you say it, but you know inside that hurts.
I'm worried about corruption, and probity is something to do with corruption. On that, I'm confident.
And on corruption, the jury is still out, Mr. Advani.
Let's see.
That's the sad part. Let's come to how you now tackle this problem. The government has, in the eyes of the public, suffered a severe blow. People believe that you need to take dramatic action just to prove to the country that you're capable of governing. Do you understand their feelings, and do you appreciate the need to do something to reassure them?
We would do that. We have some things in mind. I may also mention that because this is a matter relating to defense deals, when last year the Prime Minister appointed a group of ministers and entrusted this particular task of dealing with the problem of national security in its entirety, one problem that bothered us was this corruption in the field of defense. And so when we set up a task force headed by Arun Singh, one of the issues that he was to deal with was this issue of procurement of defense equipment.
What exactly in concrete terms do you plan to do?
We have examined the report of the task force and submitted our report to the Prime Minister, which he is presently examining, and maybe the cabinet considers it and then lays it before Parliament. But this is an important issue with which we have been dealing with.
There are really genuine, serious, concrete measures there that you're proposing?
I think so.
Can you tell me what they are?
No, as I said, it's not, I'm not free to speak about it unless first it is examined by the cabinet and presented to Parliament.
How quickly will cabinet examine this?
I think it will be done soon.
Soon means?
Quite soon.
Within a week, within 10 days, within a month, 6 months?
It would be for the Prime Minister to decide, but hopefully before this session ends.
That means in the month of May itself?
Maybe.
You accepted a moment ago that you needed to take action to reassure the country that you were capable of giving good governance. Do you accept that for the next few days, maybe even a few weeks, this government is on test?
There's nothing on test. Having responded to these revelations in the manner with which it has proved that it is different from the earlier governments.
Except some people think the difference goes against you.
Corruption is concerned.
Let me put it like this. They're saying in drawing rooms in the cities of India, we don't know how long this government will last. It could last 6 months, it could last 2 years. But it's lost its way. It's limping, it's stumbling, it's staggering. Does that concern you?
I don't think this is an assessment of the people at large, except in certain fields where they take notice of the Congress party's opposition to the approach in respect of liberalization.
It's an assessment
particularly
of the
Balco.
newspapers of the country as a whole. It's an assessment of television as a whole. Those are the opinion formers who form public opinion. Doesn't that worry you?
Very often this is related to economic measures. And those economic measures would be in jeopardy if at any point of time the Congress party decides to oppose legislation on liberalization.
Hasn't the chance of that just increased? Suddenly the Congress senses you're vulnerable. Why should they support you to push through economic measures? Instead, if they oppose you, they can undermine your image further. That's what you've become a victim of.
I do not know whose image would be undermined, ours or theirs, because this has been evident from the very beginning that in a parliament of this kind, where the ruling party commands a majority in the Lok Sabha, but doesn't have a majority in the Rajya Sabha, any legislation can go through only if both the principal parties...
Quite right, but now it's a lot easier for Congress to push you because you look weaker. Your own allies are now so divided. They're no longer with you quite so closely. You're suddenly looking weaker and more vulnerable.
It's somersault on economic issues, on the issue of liberalization. I attribute it more to the coming elections.
Okay, you mentioned economic issues twice, you mentioned liberalization twice. Are you determined to ensure that the budget, particularly the ambitious proposals on disinvestment and the ambitious, almost radical decision to reform labor law, will be implemented?
We are determined to pursue them.
Are you also likely to succeed?
I hope so. On that, I would not say I am confident, because I hope that after these assembly elections are over, the Congress would realize that if they oppose these measures, it would be they who would suffer more than even
So you will
ruling
push
party.
these economic reforms all the way till Congress realizes that they have a real dilemma on their hands.
That's right.
You won't stop halfway.
There's no question of
And you
stopping.
take your allies with you all the way.
Had it not been so, this kind of budget would not have been presented.
Very quickly, because time is against us, what about Kashmir? The ceasefire has gone into its third extension. Have you got the strength and determination to hold the peace talks necessary?
We have already decided who will hold talks and how do we proceed with it. But the peace talks would be
very quickly.
The peace talks would be in groups in India. We do not propose at the moment to have talks with Pakistan.
When will they start?
I hope soon.
Again, in the month of May?
Maybe.
Will you head them?
I would certainly be monitoring the course of the talks as being Minister for Home Affairs, but the actual talks may be conducted by others.
And this, once again, is a serious determination